Malo Lele, and welcome everyone to another live digital kava session here on the Polynesianized podcast, coming from Southern Nevada, the Silver State, the entertainment capital of the world. This is Tua Fale. We also have Mr. Aotearoa joining us from New Zealand. How's it going in
Yes,
your neck of
sir.
the woods, Masi?
Beautiful Sabbath day here in New Zealand in Aotearoa, South Auckland, Manurewa. As you can see, I just finished church not too long ago, and then kind of did some prepping and stuff. So I'm in my church outfit, my best look church outfit
Still looking good.
today.
Still looking good.
So hopefully I don't spill too much kava on the white shirt. Hey, do so, but it's good to be
Yeah.
here, Marlo.
Yeah, as we mentioned last night in our live digital kava session, we're having two live digital kava sessions in a row, which is a little bit unusual,
Yeah,
but a lot of it is because we're pretty excited to have a guest join us today. He's joining us. We've reacted to some of his content online. He's shared a lot of insight and just good energy in my perspective. So we're really excited to have this guest join us, and we're going to bring him on stage real quick just so that our viewers are familiar with. Mr. Aotearoa is going to give a welcoming to our guest and then kind of let him introduce himself. But we're going to add him to the stage right now. So we're going to add Mr. Sonny Natanielu. So we'll bring him into the stage here real quick. And Masi, if you want to give a quick introduction and,
yep.
and give the welcoming words to Mr. Natanielu, and we'll get rolling.
All right, yep. Whaftai mo le awa noa tualau o te loa wa o mai le taimi e amataina sa tātou tanoanga i lunga le tānoa. Ai e lei o de tūlanga le nā o te fia tū le whaamāloma whawhetai lo tātou te mau le langi. A wā o ia e pūrea mea uma le langi ma le lalolangi. O te fia whaailoa atu foi lo na alo Iesu Kariso o tātou wali ma tātou whaola. Sa tongi o laina mo i tātou i lunga le sa tauro. Ia o le taimi fia le nei ia te au ma tua lau e whawheloa i atu le au mai moa le nei alo Samoa i o lona suafa o Sonny Natanielu e sau mai le motu malosi dea o upolu. Ma o le afioanga e afio mai ai o Salamumu ma afioanga o Salaimoa. Ia, o le tala pupu na ma nei tangata ua tuuina lona taimi e au whaatasi mai tātou ma nei aso sā. Ma o te fia tu le awa noa ia Sani, ia su mai ma tala mai a au, ma whai se tānoma whawhiloa i atu ia tātou tangata o lo o sila mai nei pola ka ame, whaftai.
Ia malo o pito masi si o to ofa masi en tua ai pa ia sau kua fafafa ma malu sau o kai ngange ma ave ese se walofa ma lo le soifua ma lo le langi mama. Thank you too for having me on your program. Hugely honored, hugely blessed to have received your invitation. I've seen bits and pieces of what you guys do. I was thinking, you know, I'd like to spend more time, you know, hearing what you guys have to share. And of course, with some of the studies that I've done, I quote your father and some of the research he's done. So to know that I'm talking to his sons is like, wow. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm in your hands. I'm happy to follow where you guys go from here.
Awesome. I appreciate it. We are very fortunate on the program to have Mr. Aotearoa. He spent a few years in Samoa, and he was able to learn the language there. So we took advantage of it and said, what a better way to introduce our Samoan brother than to have Mr. Aotearoa give an introduction in the mother tongue there. But really, Sonny, just want to give an opportunity before we jump into it. Who are you, where you come from, where you grew up, and kind of give everybody some context to the personal experience that you had in this journey in this life.
Thank you, Chua. So I'm Samoan born, 1969. I'm an old man. Came over when I was almost two, older brother, younger brother. My father is from Salamumu, as Masi mentioned, and my mother's from Savai'i. And yes, they're both on Upolu, but my mum's lineage goes back to Fale, and my dad goes back to Sale, and both of them are in Savai'i. So we're currently based in Upolu, but ancestrally we go back to
Savai'i.
on both sides. Lived in out West Auckland most of my life, schooled out there, went to university in Auckland. I'm a social worker by trade, working primarily in crime prevention and crime intervention, and then went into work in the mental health system, and then education. And I guess the journey for me was I had the things that I'd learnt at university in terms of psychology and counseling. When I went to the social work industry, I found that those Western models of psychology and counseling did not work for the Pacific Pacific community. And so I asked them, I asked my criminals. It's a phrase of endearment that I had for them because they became quite dear to me because they started to open their lives to me. And so I asked them the question, if I was to have stopped you coming down this road of crime, what should I have done in your lives and when should I have done it? And so they started to unpack their life stories to me, which is why we became quite close. I became quite close to them. And the funny thing is, word started to spread amongst some of the criminal elements in West Auckland that there's this guy in corrections that listens to criminal stories. So these criminals, gang members would come in off the streets to the corrections office asking for me because they heard that I listened to their stories. So I collected hundreds of stories as to how people end up down the road of crime, and it was just really fascinating hearing them, their life journeys and the cultural disconnect they felt and the decisions they made to try and reconnect those cultural connections, which is how they end up in gangs and violence and robberies and domestic violence and drugs and alcohol. And so I saw that restoring those cultural connections, they could actually fix themselves. I didn't need to do any fixing myself. And that completely changed the way I thought of social work, completely changed the way I thought of therapeutic practice. And I kept on getting invitations from different organizations to help them work with Pacific people. And so I thought after about 25 years, I thought the best thing I could do for the industry is to do a significant piece of research to educate all social workers on how to work with Pacific people. Did a master's and eventually ended up doing a PhD. And so as the PhD, my PhD was on a Samoan approach to psychological resilience using the traditional Tatau. And it was in there that one of the tufunga said everything on the Tatau is to do with traditional navigation. And so I added that to my thesis. And so a lot of the stories I collected are from that. There's the literature, which is where I learned a lot from, but then there's all these beautiful oral stories that's not in the literature. And so, it's not that I know heaps. The funny thing is, with all the stories I've collected, I realized, there's so much more I don't know. So, when you guys asked me to be a guest, I was thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be a guest. I'm happy to listen and learn what you guys have to share as well, because there's so much I don't know, especially in terms of the wider Pacific and how we connect to each other in that regard. Anyway, I don't want to hijack the conversation from here, so I'll be able to pull that back. Come back to you guys.
No, 100%. Before Mr. Aotearoa, before I have you head in, we have some comments flowing in. Just real quick, from Charlie Fly, he says, "Let's go! Excited for this episode." We are as well, Charlie.
Hello, Charlie.
We're excited for this opportunity. Masi, anything to add?
No, just to add on, Sonny Natanielu, like I said, Tu and I are very appreciative for your time coming. I'm glad that you kind of brought your ancestral ties. Tu and I try to acknowledge your ancestral ties, and the only things I could find was your places of Salamumu and Savai'i. But I'm glad that you brought the ties that goes back to Savai'i, and this is why we have the live digital Gava session, is to know each other a little bit more, and then you find out that you have other ties to other places. But it's good to know your ngafa a little bit, and Tu and I are just very excited to have you, and also the rest of the viewers who are excited to learn more from you. And I believe you are our first guest from Samoan heritage. So we Tu and I we're Samoan, but a Samoan from was born there. So it's an honor for Tu and I and for the rest of the Polynesian Eyes viewers to have you, Sonny. Thank you.
Yeah, see, and this is why we really love having these conversations, because we don't know where the story is going to go, and hearing your background, Sonny, obviously we're high interest in the history and so forth, but I want to dive a little bit more into your involvement with the youth and with crime and that whole experience, because a big part of what we're hoping to achieve is to bring more connections between not only the individual groupings of people for each of the group of islands, but also with each other, and how much understanding our history and our culture can be self-productive, right? A big part of the challenges from my perspective, and I would like to hear from your side, Sonny, from your professional experience and from your research, how much an impact of not having purpose and having, and when I say purpose, it's understanding where you come from, what it took for your ancestors to allow for you to be in the situation you're in, to really empower individuals to make decisions that will be productive for the individual and for society. And we really feel that it's those connections and those relationships back to the islands. And when we say back to the islands, it doesn't always have to be back to the motherland islands, but amongst the people, even with your group of peers from the islands in a foreign land as a diaspora, even being connected to them and connected to family, how big of a role that has in allowing a foreign-born Polynesian to charter their own path, right? To navigate, to do what their ancestors have done for thousands of years, maybe not on a va'a or a vaka or a karia, but in their personal journey as individuals. Does that kind of make sense, the question I'm asking there, Sonny? Or
it's a massive question. If I stray from the answer, please bring me back into to answer. Up until, so I was born in Samoa, came over when I was about 1.5-ish, and then up until I started school, I could not speak any English. And then we started school, and then the struggle with the English language, of course. And then, after a couple of years in school, my parents banned us from speaking Samoan. And so I obeyed. And at that time, I thought this is what we have to do to fit in. Because it wasn't immediately obvious, but I realized after a few years in school that I don't fit in. I'm not like most of the people. And not just because of my skin color, but because of the fact that I'm Samoan. So there was a strong Maori presence in our school. And so me and my brothers, we joined the Maori club. We loved it. The haka that the All Blacks do, the new one, Kapa Pango, that was our haka way back in the late 70s.
Wow.
In primary school. So we were already familiar with a lot of Maori culture. And so that's what we did to fit in. What I didn't know years later was how those attempts to fit in became disconnections from who we actually were. So that when I got into my early teen years, and then, my parents were forcing us to make career decisions. School is telling us to make career decisions. When we're 14, we're told we're going to have a careers day. What career do you want? And now I have to think of a career.
Make up one.
Right. Yeah. And so it's not until you start to think of yourself in that regard that I started to realize, oh, who am I? What am I? That I'm supposed to do something in the future, that if I make the right decisions now, I'll get that future. If I make the wrong decisions now, you know, like my parents would say, you'll end up on the streets with all the gangs and all that. And so, you know, in where I grew up in Tatau North, you know, there was a heavy black power presence in those early days. And so some of my friends got caught up in that. And so that was the threat that my parents would always say, you know, if you don't pick a career, do something with your life, you're going to end up in the gangs. And so because I didn't know who I was, that's when the whole thing of, oh, I don't even know my language. I don't know anything about me, you know. And like I said, up until that time, I would have been 13, 14. Up until that time, not knowing my language, not knowing my culture didn't matter. And then there was that point where now it has to matter. And so, yeah, I really struggled with that. You know, when you get disconnected from the language and from the culture, you know, and this is where I constantly fell out with my parents. And so that's one of the big battles that we have to navigate as Pacific people away from the motherland, you know, Pacific people in the diaspora. And so, you know, now 40 years later, I'm getting these requests from overseas to provide some resources, especially language resources from them. I was, you know, getting emails from Sweden, Samoans living in Sweden, Serbia, in Lebanon. And then when I started to set up a class, a Samoan language class for Central Europe, the one from Lebanon said, oh, we're about to go into civil war. I'm going to have to pull out. I thought, oh, you get to safety first. But we're everywhere now. And although that's a cool achievement that we are everywhere and doing these amazing things all around the world, but we've also taken our disconnect with us. And so that's one of the things we have to now navigate in, you know, in the modern era, is how do we reconnect, but still keep the sense of identity we've developed over all these decades. And so, you know, some of the work that you guys do and some of these other work, you know, Genealogical and the Moana podcast and these others that are doing the sort of work that you guys are doing, how can we be an ancient people in a modern world? And a lot of our people don't realize that it's actually the ancient wisdom that we need to make it in the modern world, because the modern world has taught us we need to be this modern person and this modern person, but those boxes don't fit us. And so it's not until we hear some of the stuff that you guys talk about that we realize, oh, we don't need to be, we don't need to lose who we are. We need to go back to our ancestry, our ancient wisdom, and bring that forward. And those clothes fit better for us in a modern world. So yeah, that's why when you guys reached out, I thought, I'd love to add on my 2 cents to the work that you're doing, you know, encouraging the people in the diaspora. You know, the key to where you are, the key to your success is to reach back to the ancient wisdom and bring that forward with you, rather than to keep denying who you are. Does that kind of where you were going? I'm not
Yes,
sure
100%. There was no real target, right? It was just a general idea of a feeling and a thought. Before we go in, Mussy, want to read this comment here from our official PR rep, Water Bears.
Water Bears. Malo, Water Bears. Malo usos, paftai tele, yate oto uma. Malo, Water Bears. Malo. Appreciate it.
Mr. Aotearoa, anything to add to that?
I guess I'm just gonna have another question, Natanielu. I was thinking of what are the pathways, or what do you think is the most effective way for Polynesians or Pacific Islanders who, you know, were already in that 4th, 5th generations that kind of grown up overseas? What is the best way to reach back to some of the ancient knowledge you said and wisdom, and how to live and adapt to the modern world? Do you have any like examples or maybe some ideas you can kind of expand on that?
Yeah, one of the things that I found for myself, but also in talking with a lot of the, you know, my criminals from way back then, was the key. Like, it's really good to hear, and it's really, really good to read. Nothing wrong with that at all. But it was in the doing that things changed up for them. And so my encouragement to, you know, Pacific people 3 or 4 generations removed from the motherland, my encouragement to you is to find a way to act, find a way to do something, you know, move your body, in something indigenous, in something traditional. And it could be participating in a cover session, it could be the language, it could be going down, to the va'a, traditional va'a, and helping to build one. By all means, go and listen, but it's not until you do that a lot of that change really, really hits home. So my encouragement to you is find a way to do something indigenous, traditional, customary, cultural, and it could even be artwork, it could be carving, it could be drawing, but it's in the doing that something is released in you. So that's my encouragement.
Yeah, I'm actually a very big believer in that, in the way we've kind of encouraged some of our listeners and our viewers, Sonny, is as simple as it sounds, get involved with your family. Right? Because when you get involved with your family, you're going to have, in Tonga, we call it the kaveinga or the fa'alave, and it's going and helping with the cooking of the food or the clean. Like you're saying, it's getting engaged, because that's a very important part. We've observed that that's a critical part of how traditions are maintained. It's engagement, right? And one of the ideas that we've kind of tossed around, and I wanted to see if this is something that may make sense in other parts. But one of the areas that we've kind of observed as we look back to the Kingdom of Tonga, there's the temptation, like you were saying, the temptation is this modern world approach to building wealth and building infrastructure. And that is, you go to these big banks and you go and apply there, where what that does is, number one, it disengages from the people from the island. Like, to me, I would really encourage and love the idea of, why aren't we advertising to the diaspora overseas to come back to Samoa for vacation? Don't go to Europe. Why don't you come to Samoa or to Fiji or to Tonga and engage? Because that's how you physically engage in something. And I think our governments have underestimated the power of our diaspora overseas. And I'll just use Tonga as an example. On one of our programs you were talking about, and I know Samoa is high remittance state, right? You remove remittances from the Samoan or the Tongan economy, those economies will flip upside down. The only thing that's keeping those economies somewhat stable, it is the relationship with our brothers and sisters spread around the world. So why don't we focus our engagement with them? Because that's the money that they're sending back, but they're also going on vacation. They're also investing in other things. And we had a couple sisters from Tonga. We were talking. There is a high interest for the diaspora to invest back in the islands, but our governments are not engaging with them or not making it easy. They're actually kind of getting in the way. And I'm wondering if this is another way to kind of engage and to facilitate economic growth, but it's that re-engagement and coming back home, getting involved in, a small community engagement in building, whether it's, some of the things I hear back in Tonga is, they need to update the new pump for the village, right? For water. So what they'll do is these kalapus will come together, they'll put money together. Some of them will come down and help install it. And those, to me, are kind of maybe non-traditional ways to engage our people, to maintain those relationships. And we think, or at least this is how it was when I grew up in Tonga, we think that the benefits is only one way, right? We see all the money coming from overseas. What we forget is what the islands provide back is what you said. It is that connection back to our ancestors and giving them meaning and purpose when they go overseas, where it's a lot more of a challenge. So it actually is a very healthy exchange. One is know-how and foreign skills and monetary benefit, while the return is reconnecting, giving meaning and purpose to help the diaspora overseas navigate the challenges over there. But I highly believe that that's, like you have mentioned, a very important part of navigating the challenges of the modern world and avoiding, crime. Because all that is, in my opinion, Sonny, and you can give more details in it, the the experience I had, the draw of the gangs in crime is a purpose. It's a brotherhood. It's a sisterhood. They're trying to provide meaning into a void in the individual, but they don't understand the consequences. By the time they realize the consequences, many times it's too late. You're already engaged in this activity. But I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts. I don't know if there's something from your study or your experience that can give more detail, or maybe that's an incorrect perspective, but just thought to share that.
No, sorry, Masi, you gonna say something?
No. I was like, no. Go ahead, Sonny.
So one of the things that one of the key conclusions in my PhD was because it was to do with psychological resilience, and one of the conclusions I reached in there was there's all this wisdom, there's all these philosophies tied into the Tatau that when you undertake the process, you embrace that as you go through the process, and then what that does, how that changes you, is why it's such a transformative tradition and custom. And so when I applied that, in terms of the what people can do with that from here, I made the conclusion in my PhD that I think, in the same way for Muslims, there's this lifelong task to one day return to Mecca or make a pilgrimage. And so in the same way, I made the conclusion that I think for every Pacific person in the world, they must make a pilgrimage back to their motherland. And when they go back, don't go back to holiday. Don't go back for a long holiday. Go back for 2 years, at least 2 years, because that's how you really connect. And when you go back, don't go back to look, go back to give, go back to serve. Whatever your skill is, if it's nursing, if it's carpentry, whatever your skill is, teaching, go back and do that in Samoa for the motherland for at least 2 years. And then once you've done your 2 years, find a way to mark that journey, be it a tatau, be it building a family fale, or whatever. Find a way to mark what you did, so that you now know, I was here, my family was here, and so that no matter where you go in the world, at least you made that connection back home. Well, when I was living in Samoa, and I was only there for 2 years, I actually moved back to Samoa to live, and I only had to come back to New Zealand because of the I was given a scholarship to finish my PhD, and the condition was I had to come back here to finish. And then when I came back, by the time I finished, all the lockdowns happened, and so I haven't been able to return back to Samoa since. But when I moved to Samoa in 2014, that was to live. And the weird thing was, everywhere I went, every waterfall I went to, every village I went to, every beach I swam at, I was always asking, what's the story behind this? What's the story behind the name and all of that? And every story I heard, I just found myself connecting to that place, even though it's not my village, even though it's not my family. I just found myself connecting to everywhere, to the point where the more and more I connected to Samoa, the more bulletproof I felt, the more unafraid I was, the more
confidence
I
level.
could see, I can do this PhD. Heck yeah, this is going to be done, And so when I left there to come back here to finish, I had connected to pretty much all of Samoa because of all the different places I went to and the different people I talked to. That I feel so connected to Samoa. I brought Samoa back on my body. I've got the tatau and everything.
Yeah.
And I also voyaged on Ngawalofa, Samoa's voyaging canoe there. And it just made me feel so not so much strong, but I feel so connected that I'm not afraid to try everything. I've got these community projects I'm working on that are huge in scale, and someone insignificant like me, what the hell am I doing with such a big vision like that? But I'm not afraid of the vision. I'm not afraid of the work required to make these projects happen, because I feel so connected to a motherland that just makes me unafraid to try everything. And so you get that from going home, making those connections and going home for a significant amount of time, holiday everywhere around the world, but come home and connect. And my guess from what I've seen, a really solid connection is about 2 years. And so, for people who have a family, young family, come home, go home with the family, let it be a mission for the whole family to make those connections. So yeah, exactly what you're saying. But I think, don't just come home, but come home to give. Whatever skill you have, come home to give it, and you'll find all these stories and all these people you connect to, all these ancestries, all these histories, all these stories, and the richness of it, and the wisdom contained in all of that. And then you realize, oh, that's my people. That's in my blood. That's in my veins. I often say, I'm 56 years old. My skin is 56 years old. My blood is 5,000 years old. And when you go home and make those connections, you realize the scale of that. Oh man, I'm just me. But look at all the line of people before
Behind
me
you.
that are looking and seeing, okay, where are you going to take this lineage next? And when you get that, well, goosebumps.
Yeah,
Sorry.
100%.
I'll be quiet. Yeah, you guys.
No. That's fantastic. I really agree with that. I have another kind of question, but Mr. Aotearoa, you have anything to share? Or
No, when he said about the 2 years, I was just thinking of just our faith. Where LDS, they encourage the young men to serve 2 years, and I feel like when you said 2 years, I feel like that's the 2 years that our leaders felt prompted that that's the 2 years you feel like you're gonna be engaged, familiar with the culture, language, and to encourage others to invite others to Christ or to our faith kind of thing. So it's kind of same thing. That two
Yeah.
years you mentioned, Sonny Natanielu, that 2 years is you're engaged, you formed relationships, and you were able to figure out where you fit in within the village, within a role, and how to participate. And like you said, you just strengthen your cultural identity that way. So I just find that very fascinating that you provided 2 years. And I was like, dude, I was just thinking, because today was church and stuff. I was thinking, dude, no wonder our leaders say 2 years for the young men to go serve abroad and stuff. But that's all. I just got to pull that parallel
yeah,
together.
no, appreciate that. The one thing I've noticed, Sonny, and since you've gone through the Tatau ceremony and experience, one of the things that I've really observed, and it was kind of a surprise to me because it seems to be a spiritual experience going through the whole experience with the tufunga. And I've kind of thought about it because it kind of was a surprise to me. But it seems to make sense, especially tied to the approach that you're sharing, Sonny, of giving and getting engaged. That is a form of sacrifice, right? Because that's really what it is you're sacrificing time, resources, your personal goals, whatever it is, to be engaged in that one aspect of the culture. And it leads to a certain result that you've experienced and that you have invited others to partake in. And when we take that, when you look at the Tatau process, it seems to be a small capsule or a compressed version of that, because you're taking away your time, you're suffering through pain, but you're engaging in a practice that's been done for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And what I've observed is that Tufunga is also sharing knowledge, context, and history through that whole process. And that seems to lead to a very spiritual experience. I've seen individuals cry at the end of this, right? Like they say it's a very overwhelming experience. And I want you to kind of help us go through your process with the Tatau. But I want our viewers to understand is to make that connection of why being engaged is so important, because it's a sacrifice. It's not until in Tongan we call it mamahi mea. And what does mamahi mean? It's to have pain. It's to suffer. Believe it or not, that suffering is extremely valuable to you, right? We, as human beings in the modern world, we're kind of encouraged to run away from the suffering, right? You need, the fa'alave, man, that's so burdensome. It's overdone, and it's even I suffer from this. I grew up in Tonga, and you see it, and you're like, man, if we save that money, we probably could have a nice house. We probably could have a pretty nice car. But as I've matured, I've realized it's like, you take that away, then there's no difference between us and others. And I have a short video from a foodie online here in Las Vegas, but that I wanted us to react to. But I wanted to give you an opportunity, son. Just what was that experience for you getting? What made you want to get your Tatau, and then what that experience was for you and how it impacted you as an individual?
I'll just first comment the way you spoke about it just there. Oh, that sounds like you're getting ready for you should be getting one pretty soon. Am I right?
Yeah,
we do have Samoan heritage. What's the Mapusanga? I think what's that name of that main part of Upolu? We have a lot of family. We actually have a lot of
the Tuamasanga kind of district, but I think our connections is more the Fastoutai and Fastouta. Our Samoan heritage in Upolu.
Yeah, I've always been criticized by my elder brother for not being a good genealogist. It's like, it's definitely not my talent. But yes, but maybe, I don't know, maybe one day we at the digital kava sessions, one of the things we tell our viewers, you have to come with an open mind. You have to be willing to listen. And when the idea presents itself, if you don't have an open mind, you won't have the opportunity to reap the benefits. But yes, so my answer is, Sonny, maybe that's in my future. Who knows?
I mean, I'll share a little bit about the background to getting my Tatau and see how much of that fits with your journey. When I was getting ready to get my Tatau, my aunt, so my mother's sister, she was living here in Auckland, and so I would visit her often because 3 of her sons had gotten the Tatau, and so I was talking to her about how to get ready and stuff like that, and then it was actually her son who was living in Samoa that I reached out to and said, please book the tufunga, ami le tufunga, and then he booked it, and I was set for, this is 2012. I was set to get it done the beginning of June 2012. And so in April, I was talking with, I was talking with my aunt and just, the final preparations, because the year before this, and then the year before that, I had, those 2 times I had made an attempt to get my Tatau, and both times fell short. And I was questioning myself, well, what does that mean? And so this 3rd time, I thought, that's it. I'm going to get it done no matter what. So I'm talking with my aunt, and she's explaining to me the types of towels, the types of lava, the types of antibiotic cream, and which plants to use in Samoa to help with the healing and all that. And then she kind of went through a bit of a checklist with me to make sure I was ready. And then she said to me, well, it sounds like you're ready. Sounds like, your journey and everything sounds like you're ready to do this. The only last thing I have to ask you is, have you got your parents' blessing? And I said, oh, no, I don't. And I said to my aunt, I'm done with my parents. For about 35 years, I had argued with them. I'd asked them, can I get it? Can I get it? Me, my older brother, and my younger brother, when I was 19, we got a matai title from my mother's village in Savai'i. And my dad said to us, let's go get our Tatau. And we said, yes. And mum goes, le ai. And she put a stop to it. And then she started quoting the Bible, and then that shut it down. But me being me, when dad put that in my head, I never let go of it. Every year, mum, dad, can I get my Tatau now? And then the next year, can I get it now? And so for years, and then after a while, I thought, I'm going to have to do more than just ask him. I'm going to have to argue with them. So I, did a bit of research and, had a conversation. Well, I thought it was a conversation, but mum and dad goes, "Leai." They weren't hearing anything. And
Thank you
mum was
for your
quoting the Bible.
conversation, but no.
Yeah. This is no conversation. It's just dictation. Leai. And then mum kept quoting the Bible. And so I did this exegesis on the on what Moses was talking about, the Levitical laws, and then etymology on Tatau, tattoo, and all of that, bloodletting, all of that. Looked at the original Hebrew text, all of that, and then went back then the following year, and but the Bible says this, and mum, and so I said to my aunt, I'm done fighting with them. I'm done arguing with them. There's no more. They're not going to give me their blessing no matter what. I'm just going to do this without them. And my aunt goes, Sonny, Sonny, if you have love for me, get their blessing. And she said to me, this journey is more a spiritual matter than it is a physical and a cultural matter. Yes, you'll get the tatau physically, but there are spiritual things in here at play that you cannot ignore. And your parents' blessings is critical in that spiritual journey. And I really felt that. I didn't fully understand, but I really felt that. I thought, oh man. So that was on a Sunday. Tuesday, I booked my flights. Thursday, I was in Sydney because my parents were living in Sydney. And Thursday, I was in Sydney. That was Easter. And then before I was due to come back at the end of that weekend, I said to my parents, there's this thing I want to talk to you about. And then I said, I've already, Amili Tufunga. It's already been booked. I'm booked to start in June. And then before I could carry on, my mum was about to oppose again. And I said, Mum, there is no more talk. We've talked for 35 years. You've said no. I kept insisting. There is no more talk. I didn't come here to talk. I came here to get your blessing. I am going to get it done with or without your blessing. So now it's up to you whether you bless me or not. And then my dad spoke up and he goes, yeah, you're right. The time has come. We should let you go. And I thought, that's all it took. And then they gave me their blessing. And then I went to get it done. And then I got there and I went through it by myself because my family in Samoa worked for the government. And so they were out on different government duties. And then it was only towards the end of my tattooing sessions that they were back. And then they helped me with the end part of it. And I thought it was okay to do it by myself. Whoa, what a fia boko I was. I really felt the loneliness. And I really felt this is why you never get it done by yourself because of that spiritual journey. And so, when I track the spiritual aspects of getting to that point, I understand it is more a spiritual journey than it is a physical and cultural journey. And so, my encouragement to you, if you track back in your life, do all the streams gather at this waterfall? And if it does, then perhaps your time has arrived. That's my encouragement to you, brother.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Anything there, Mr. Aotearoa? There is a story about Taupahau and tattoo in Samoa I want to touch a little bit on. Okay. But any thoughts on that, Mr. Aotearoa?
No, well, I was going to say maybe you touch on that because I wanted to ask Sonny with some of the oral histories I've heard in Samoa regarding the Tatau, because there's two oral histories that you want me to go with that and then go with
let's jump into that. Okay. I think that fits better with the string that we're pulling on right now.
Yes. So yeah, for you, Natanielu, I would share. So the two common oral history of the Tau, and I want your thoughts on this is one, it came from Fiji, right? And then the other one is from Manua, and those are the two that I'm familiar with. I don't know if there's any other oral history that you're familiar with the origin of the Tatau or Songai Miki Malofie Malu, or is there an oral history that maybe I'm not aware of, or that there is another one? But I just wanted your thoughts on that.
So I got to talk to 4 different tufunga, and quite a lot of those who have the tatau. And then when I finished my PhD, I got to talk to 3 other tufunga, about the same conversations and origins and all of that. And the thing that those tufunga have to say is that the Pesiole Tatau that Samoans sing all the time, it is not a historically accurate version of the Tatau story. None of the tufunga accept the Pesiole Tatau as the story of the Tatau. Yeah, and in fact, they say the tufunga say that the Pesiole Tatau was actually written quite recently, about 100 or about 120 years ago, by an entertainer for the entertainment of the German administration that governed Samoa at the time. And so, because it was written for entertainment, the historical parts were brought in for entertainment purposes, not for historical accuracy. So the tufunga say that the twins never came singing a song. There is no such song. And the twins didn't come from Fiji. The twins came from Fitiuta. That Fiti is short for Fitiuta, which is part of Manua. And so, and then they also said that from what they understand, Fijians say that they got the tatau from Samoa. And so lots of parts in the Pese are that the reference to it is correct, but the connecting parts of that reference is incorrect. So that the twins never swam from Fiti to Falealupo. The very first thing that's tattooed on the body is the va'a, and the va'a, which is the part on the back. The va'a represents the twins' journey to Falealupo, and so if they had swum, then that would be a swimming motif, not a va'a motif. So the va'a is to honor the twins' journey, and that swimming is a metaphor. If you understand the oral traditions, they often spoke in metaphors and proverbs, and that swimming is a metaphor for voyaging. It's not. It doesn't literally mean freestyle right across the Pacific.
Yeah.
And so if you understand the Pesiole Tatau metaphorically, then you'll get a greater sense of the actual story behind it. So this is what the tufungas unpacked to me. This is what they explained to me. The Pesiole Tatau is not an accurate version of the story of the Tatau. And that if you want to know the true story, talk to the tufungas. Don't listen to an entertainment song. So there's a whole bunch of it, and I don't want to go too much into it because then it'll take up too much time. But is that what you were asking about?
Yes. I just wanted to hear what your experience and engaging on try to rediscover maybe the more accurate of the where Samoa got the tatau kind of from. So that's all, because those are the 2 dominant oral histories. Fitiuta, like you mentioned, with Manua, and then from Fiji because of the song. And I 100% agree with you, Sonny Natanielu, because you've provided the perfect example, like what you said with the songs. Because there's my Tevita Fale. He's corrected in Tonga. I don't know if you heard, Tuo, you know how they sing the Tongan months, the ancient traditional months in Tonga, which is the seasons of when you plant yams, ufi. And they were doing it, and people were saying, no, these are the traditional months of Tonga. But then my father corrected it because, like what you said, it was an entertainment. They did it because it rhymed and it fit together, and it was inaccurate. And then he was able to, and then he was able to put together the correct version of the traditional months because it was going against the seasons of planting the ufi. So when you said, like, with the history with the Tatau, which is a lot of referencing to Fiji, that just when you like you just provide some valid points to what my Devita Fale said was inaccurate, because it's like what you said, people just create it for entertainment. It rhymes better, so they just do it this way. It's not about giving the correct accuracy of the account of where it came from. So that's all. I was just like, dude, Sunny, you just provided the reason why my Devita Fale provided the correct traditional months in Tonga, which is 13. So No, that's all. I just wanted to add on to what Sonny was saying,
Yeah.
validating that point.
So, Sunny, in digging into that a little bit more, do the tufungas in Ha'amoa, do they provide more granular detail as to when the first tatau started and so forth? And there's some comments going on some of our YouTube saying it's from Fiji. This is why we all have to have these conversations, because everyone will bring a story from where they come from. We can have us three watch a incident happen, and then we tell what we saw, and sometimes we tell what we saw and they might not always jive, because it depends on your perspective, how you're viewing, what your personal biases are, the angle. So you have to take all these stories into account, and then you have to make your own decisions. Like you're saying, you have to make your own decisions on what's valuable to me. But what's the thoughts from the tufungas, if they shared any with you, is what was the origin of the tatau, and what was is there any knowledge on the first one, why it was developed, right? Like why did we develop the tatau as being so critical, and how common was the practice amongst our ancestors in the past?
Yeah. Let me first address some of those comments that are saying, no, it really is Fiji, it really is Fiji. Look, I understand, one of the things, as I started to learn Samoan oratory through my father, he explained to me in traditional Samoan oratory, the use of proverbs, there is no such thing as the one story to rule over them all, one truth to rule over them all. My father was saying that orators learn to live with contradictions and contestations. You don't have to find one overarching truth over all the other truths. And so the way I would use a proverb, a different orator would use a proverb in a different way. I'm right, they're right. We don't need to debate over who is more right or less right. That's a very Western way of thinking. And that the traditional way of thinking is you're right, I'm right, we're good to go. And my father was saying to me, if I am humble, and I'm not, but I'm learning to be, he said, if I'm humble, I will embrace these other ways, these other stories, these other interpretations, because then that gives me an insight about them and their village and their family. And so rather than trying to disprove anything, embrace everything. And so that really helped me to hear different versions of the same story and let them all be true, rather than trying to find who's more truer than the other. And so, the story that I just talked about, these are from the tufunga, these are from the master tattooists. It's not me. I haven't gone making stuff up. But I subscribe to what they say over anybody else, because not only is there a whole bunch of tufunga saying this, but they are the master knowledge keepers. I have a PhD, and in the Palangi world, that means I'm, it's the highest qualification you'll get in academia. And so in the Palangi world, they will consider me an expert in this field. But in our world, we have our own experts. They are tufunga. And to me, they are the master knowledge keepers. They're the master knowledge holders. And what they say, I'm going to embrace that over someone else's opinion. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to anyone else's opinion. I will hear it. But I'm not going to debate it. I'm not going to say you're wrong, I'm right. I'm just going to say, oh, here's what these guys say. And what you have to say will add on to that. But I'm going to still run with this because I trust their authority and their expertise. And so, people say it's from Fiji. Yeah, cool. I'll hear that. I'll embrace that. I'm not going to say no, it's not. Yeah, some people believe it, and I'm not going to say they're wrong. I'm gonna embrace that as well. But the story that I will tell will be the story that these guys have told me, knowing that there are these others that believe otherwise, and that's cool as far as I'm concerned. I'm all right with that. And so, keep to your beliefs until you hear something that will change your mind. What you're saying, be open to that. And then as you are open to that, it may change your mind. Cool. Then let's continue to share and let's continue to hear other stories, no matter how contrary it is to what I, all the stories that I choose to go with. So yeah, there comes a time when you must choose, but that doesn't mean you have to get rid of everything else. I think carry everything else with you.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I agree with that. I mean, there's a lot to be learned, and I think the approach that you're bringing here, Sonny, that your dad is sharing from listening to it and just kind of thinking about it is, and it's a very Polynesian perspective, and it is the relationship matters more. Right? And that's what I feel and kind of understand that what your father is saying is we can get stuck in the weeds, or we can say a better way to understand is to listen and take into that perspective. And a prime example is looking at your story of the Tatau. For 35 years, you believed something very different. And your parents believed something very different.
Yeah.
And for 35 years, you were saying, you know what? I believe a different story, but obviously my mother believes a different story.
Yeah.
The relationship matters. And this is what your aunt was asking you one more time. She was saying, hey, look, you're a grown man. You're going to make your decision. I'm just asking, let's take one more swing at it. I know you've done 35 years, and look at what that one more swing did. Yeah. That was the swing that allowed you to move forward. But I think it's very important that we can all hold our own opinions and ideas.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean everybody else's has to submit to it. But like you said, you have to be bold. If you really believe what you believe, then you will say, you know what? I give everyone else that right too, to believe what they want to believe and bring those stories to the table. How many days did it take for you to do the Tatau, Sonny?
So it was 3 days a week over 3 weeks, so 9 sessions altogether. When it came to my legs, because of all the rugby injuries and league injuries and
all the history is coming back.
Yeah, the Chifunga felt that he could do double sessions on my legs, and so I think normally it takes 12 sessions. I got it over 9 sessions with double sessions on my legs. And really the Chifunga will just go off what you are, where you are and what you're doing, and how you're responding to the tattooing instruments. The most beautiful 9 days, incredible journey, really broke me down, and rebuilt me again.
The reason why I ask is because the history that I've heard, and it's interesting, and it's a very interesting, because there are those who, we're obviously have close connections to Tonga and Tonga's ability to keep our sovereignty is something we're very proud of. And actually, I make the argument that all of Polynesia should be proud of. And this could be something we could talk to after this comment is what your thoughts are on the Polynesian nation. We'll get to that right after this. But Taufa'ahau obviously adopts Christianity, but something interesting happens. He comes to a point where he decides he's going to get his Tatau. And this is after converting. And he's actually told by the Christians, do not go get your Tatau. And Taufa'ahau says, and I have my own, I have my own personal reasons for why I believe he said it, but he chooses anyways to go down despite that. And the rumor has it is he gets it done in 1 day. I don't think that's physically possible, right? Because everyone I've heard, it has been multiple days over it. And maybe I'm misremembering the story. Have you heard? But the rumor has it he gets it done in 1 day. And,
1 day. No. Also, go ahead, Tua. Finish what you're going to say.
No, I was just going to say, like how there's the history, the oral history part of it. I'm trying to ask the practical side of it is that even physically possible to get it done in 1 day?
I heard that. So from everyone that I've spoken to and their journey, and also the tufunga, um, I've calculated that it takes altogether, it takes about 34 to 36 hours on average to get a tatau. Of course, the bigger the person, the more time it takes. I've heard from some people that you know the bigger people took up to 45 hours to get theirs done. So yeah, physically impossible to get it done in 24 hours, and also physically impossible to get it done non-stop because you must sleep. And so I'm not sure where that story comes from and who's telling that story. Although I have heard something like that, somebody got it done in 1 or 2 days. I thought, wow, me personally, with my limited knowledge, I don't know. Physically, it can't be done in 24 hours. Like I said, on average, 34 to 36 hours. Oh, actually, I shouldn't say on average, minimum. The fastest I know of was 34 hours. And that was done in 1 week because they had to sleep and recover. And so the fastest I've heard it done was 34 hours in total. So that's all I know. But like I said, you know, if there's a story that says it was done in 1 day, I mean, I don't know how they are counting those days, the so-called hours. I don't know, you know, the strength of the people back then, you know. So
yeah, they could handle a lot more pain than we could, maybe. Yeah.
It could have been done. And so I'm not going to go around saying, no, it's impossible. I just embrace that. There's that story. Not once have I gone to say, there's a load of rubbish. No, I just acknowledge that that story exists. And yeah, that's just how it is. I'm not going to try and fight it. I'm not going to try and prove it's wrong. But I know in my mind what I think, but I'm not going to pass that on. I'm not going to go around looking for people telling that story. So, oh, that's a load of rubbish. Like I said, I know there's these way out stories that people are saying. Okay, yeah, if that's what some people are saying, okay, I'm not gonna fight against that.
Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts on a Polynesian nation, as in a group of people? You know, Captain Cook and many of, I wouldn't say many, some of the early Europeans that came, but especially Captain Cook, he refers to the islands as a nation. And it's primarily driven because of, he says there's pretty much the same language. He sees the similarities in the culture, and in the technology of crafts in many ways. So he kind of takes that approach. What are your thoughts on that? Just open, whatever your thoughts on that. Is that something you're open to? Something you say, you know, unlikely because of A, B, or C? Just what are your position?
That's a really troublesome question. It just opens all sorts of floodgates. I'll probably start by saying, you know, as you guys will know, Polynesia is not our word. It's another Palangi's word. I think it's Derville, one of the European explorers, you know, a few hundred years ago. And so he divided it into many islands, little islands, and dark islands. But you know, without any knowledge of our history, of our ancestry, you know, he's just gone and divided us the way he saw fit. And so my problem with that is that it comes from somebody else telling us how we should delineate and categorize ourselves. So that's the first thing for me, is I'm not going to accept that. So I personally do not like that division: Polynesia, Melanesia, Micronesia. The little that I know of from the so-called Micronesian islands, a lot of the islands have stories that link them genealogically back to Savai'i and Tonga. And so that's from their stories. They are not separate from us. And I know I think it's in Solomon Islands, Taumako. Taumako is considered Solomon, but when they talk about their genealogies, they ngafa back to Nuku'alofa and Savai'i. And so even though the Western world has divided us like that, when we look at ourselves, there is no such division. In my mind, from the stories that I've collected, and like I said, I don't know a lot, but the few stories that I've collected, the clear delineation I can see is the Fijian line and our line. And when I say our line, it would be Polynesia and Micronesia. A long time ago, I got to talking with some Vanuatu and from Solomon people from at different times, and they were saying to me their old stories that they are ancient Fijians. So that whole line of that dark-skinned, from what the stories that I've gathered, connects Fiji, Vanuatu, all of that side to Fiji, and in fact parts of Papua New Guinea and the northern and eastern parts of Australia, even the indigenous people, some of the indigenous peoples there, from the stories I've gathered, connect them to Fiji. So that's a clear delineation from that side, and then there's our side. So the Pacific is where we seem to meet. But yeah, the so-called Micronesia and Polynesia, our ancestors say that we are one people, historically, genealogically, ancestrally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I sit in terms of those boundaries. So I've never liked the term Polynesia. Not to say you're not allowed to use it, but I don't call us. I don't like it in that I don't use those delineations.
No,
I
100%.
always talk about Pacific people, or more recently, I talk about Tangata Moana.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it's funny, and I'll just clarify my position there. What I mean by Polynesian, it's people that share the same cultural, ideological, religious, and language. Doesn't matter whether you're in quote unquote Melanesia or Micronesia, but there definitely is a strong swath of islands that we say a similar language, similar religious structure, and similar technological, wherever they come from. As you know, Devita Fale also doesn't like certain terms like Lapita. He doesn't like Lapita, and he doesn't like Austronesian for the exact reasons, right? Where he says that is an ideology that kind of never included our oral history in the development of that ideology. So totally understand the position you come from. And I guess what I'm really kind of trying to dig at more is real quick before we continue, as we mentioned to a lot of our viewers, if you want to make a comment, please in the super chats. We do have a super chat that popped up, and it's from Clyde Moore, one of our regulars. He says, "Maloi tautoelava mai kautama." Appreciate maloi maukava, Clyde Moore.
Malo maukava.
So appreciate it. And if you have a question, Clyde Moore, you want to ask, please shoot that over, and we'll include it. But trying to recognize our viewers as we go. Hey, as we mentioned to everyone, there's a lot of conversations going on. Great, we appreciate it. But if you're burning for a question, throw a little kava bag, and we'll pull up your question. Really, what I was kind of driving to in that question, and maybe some people feel it's controversial. As you know, Sonny, whenever you get involved in the public square, there's gonna be supporters and there's gonna be critiques. One of the biggest things that we're interested in, and we have quite a bit of discussion on it, is because there's a language, there's a religious, there's a scientific portion. What was the structure of this nation? Number one, you have to believe, was there such a nation, right? And if you do, it's more than just we share a few things. Was it structured? Was it organized? Or do you take the position of it's just a bunch of cousins who went all over, populated? It wasn't very organized and structured. I'm just trying to understand what your perspective of the Polynesian nation or the Moana nation, whatever you want to call it. It's trying to get an understanding. And just so you know, very transparent, we are big believers in it. We take a position that it existed. we have a lot of oral history and reasons for believing that Tonga was the capital of it. We have a lot of our brothers and sisters who say Samoa. We have, and this is another thing I've learned as part of doing this. We're hearing Fiji as the capital or the centralized position. We're hearing
Tahiti.
Aotearoa in Tahiti.
Yeah, yeah.
So once again, like we talked about, there's all kinds of stories going on. What's kind of your thoughts? What do you even believe that there was an organized enough structure on it, or if this is something you don't feel comfortable talking about, that's totally fine. But just wanted to bring that up as something we want to hear your thoughts on that.
Man, my mind has gone to something that it wants to say.
Wherever your mind wants to go.
I want to hold it back because so my reluctance is so I am Samoa proud,
100%, and you should be
Samoa forever. I put it on my skin,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But once I got into the traditional navigation stories and histories, I saw that there was a time before we were called Samoan, before we were called Tongan, Cook Island, Tahitian, Niue, before any of those names existed. We were one people that traveled around the Pacific, and we didn't need to have names of nations or islands because we were one people.
100%.
And so as I started to collect these stories, I started to see where some of the stories didn't take us. And then, if I was to add up, certain stories and apply a simple logic to those stories to fill in the gaps. And so I'm reluctant to talk about it because there's so many gaps in my own theory about this. And so that's why my mind is going there, but I'm going, no, I don't want to make that public. I'll share it in small groups, but I don't want to make it public because there's so many stories, there's so many gaps in it. It's like A, B, C, H, M, purple, 3, 7, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if I apply a simple logic to those, to those different stories, the story that I arrive at is quite far-fetched. And so keep that in mind as I share this, right?
Okay.
It's easy to disprove what I'm about to say. But like I said, it's, I'm just applying a simple logic to connect very, very few stories about this.
That's what we want to hear. This is what the conversation is. What's your perspective, right?
Yeah.
Your life experience, your education, your cultural exposure, your oral histories. We want to hear those ideas.
So I'll put it out there in the hope that it will draw out more stories to either add to it or make me change my story. Yeah, like I said, I don't have a problem with conflicting stories and confirmational stories. But the only way to get those stories out is to actually put something out there in the hope that those who do have knowledge will add to it. So here's what I think. Again, it's only what I think. So in terms of were we an organized people? Absolutely. We were people of the ocean before we were people of the land. I'm going to talk about a migration circuit. And of course, with any circuit, where's the beginning? Where's the beginning of the circuit? But because I'm Samoan, I'm going to talk as if Samoa was the beginning of the circuit. But keeping in mind, anywhere in that circuit could be the beginning.
Fair point.
If there is such a thing, right? So before we were called Samoan, so there's some literature, anthropologists that say we were named after the island we lived on, not the nationhood we subscribed to. There was no such thing as nationhood, 5,000 years ago. So if Savai'i, I'm going to talk as if Savai'i is the beginning. Remember, they're known as Savai'ians, not Samoans. So there we are in Savai'i. We live, we breathe, we do everything that people do. And after, my guess is about 200, 300 years, the resources run low. Within that time, the voyagers have gone ahead, found the next place, come back, taken a portable biota, plants and animals, go to that next place they found, have that ready, start to grow it up, so that when the migration moves, that next place is already ready. Where we are, we take us with us. And so in Savai'i, that's where we are. We leave some behind to replenish the resources, and then the migration happens. In Samoa, Savai'i. In Rarotonga, Avaiki. In Tahiti, the island we now know of as Aotearoa, the original name is Avaiki. In the Tuamotus, the main island there, Hawaii. And then up north, what we call Hawaii, properly pronounced Hawaii. And so every maybe 200, 300, maybe 500 years, we move. We take us with us. And then Hawaiki down to the south. So when people ask, where's Hawaiki? To me, I think I would suggest perhaps Hawaiki is not a place. Hawaiki is a people. And that's perhaps who we were back in that time. And so that by the time the migration circuit comes back to the beginning, perhaps 1,000, 2,000 years have passed. And so when the migration comes back to the beginning of the circuit, there, within that time, 20, 30 generations have come up, new people on island with the migration circuit coming around, probably a civil war to determine the nature of the governing
structure
system.
Yeah. Yep. Who's going to be
And then once the civil war is decided, we carry on as one people and then continue the circuit. So my guess is if we've been out in the Pacific for about 5,000 years, which is what Dane and Sam and New Zealand historians suggest, then there was perhaps maybe 2 or 3 circuits in that time before colonization that then you get, the concept of nationhood and the boundaries start to get drawn differently to how we did it. So that's my guess when I add up very, very few stories and just follow a simple voyaging logic to add up the gaps.
Yeah.
So yes, it was organized. And yes, we were one people that traversed around the Pacific in a very organized way. And then as we started to fill up the ocean, you get different voyaging fleets happening at different times outside of the main migration circuit. And so the settling of Aotearoa was, I don't think it was done by the migration circuit, but it was done by voyaging fleets from Tahiti, Rarotonga, and Savai'i. And so different parts of Aotearoa, different iwi, as they are uncovering their island ancestry. I understand Tainui and Te Arawa whakapapa back to Tahiti, ngā puhi whakapapa back to Savai'i, Ngati Porou whakapapa back to Rarotonga. So these islands, the iwi here, are realizing as they trace their waka routes, you can see that different migration fleets outside of the main migration circuit came here at different times. But it was still considered part of the circuit because there was such a significant arrival of our people here. And so I often say, Maori aren't Maori, Maori are us that came here, and we aren't us, we are Maori that said, it's too cold, we're going back to the tropics. One people that traversed the Pacific in a very organized manner. And this is where I talk about, this is where I think of it as a migration circuit. Did that kind of go to Lindsay?
No, 100%. Yes, that's exactly. And I'm going to build off of that. But Clyde Moore did throw his kava bag onto the table. He didn't have a question, but we're going to highlight some of his comments since he threw a kava bag on the table. Clyde Moore says, I agree with Sonny. The gaps are so vast. It's very difficult to come to a definitive conclusion. And then also Clyde Moore says, I'm with Sonny. I feel like we've moved and taken what we've learned with us. Dwindling resources, in my opinion, definitely played a role in warring. Wars created group entities. These entities eventually meet. So, Clyde Moore, you get highlighted
Hello,
because your
Clyde
kava
Moore.
bag was thrown to the table. There are lots of other comments that maybe are not so favorable, but if you want your unfavorable comment,
Put your cover
contribute to that
bag.
comment. Throw your kava bag, and then we will we'll bring that up.
Alofa atu, ofa atu. Take care, everyone.
Malo, peace.